You're kneeling on straw soaked in blood. An entire crowd stopped whatever they were doing just to watch you die. Kids sitting on their parents' shoulders, street vendors weaving through the audience, people who showed up before dawn just to get a good spot. You don't know how much it's going to hurt. You only know that in a few seconds you're about to find out. This was the fate of millions of people throughout history. And every era, every country, every government picked a different way to do it. Some wanted speed, others wanted suffering, and some, the most disturbing of all, wanted both at once, dressed up as justice. The guillotine. If you were condemned in revolutionary France, the last sound you'd hear would be an 88-pound blade dropping from nearly 10 feet up. The cut happened in under half a second, too fast for the brain to even register pain. Or so the doctors of the time claimed. But there are unsettling accounts of severed heads that blinked, moved their eyes, and reacted when their names were called seconds after falling. To this day, nobody knows for sure whether consciousness survives even briefly after the blade drops. The guillotine was adopted in 1792 as a humane method, faster and more equal than what came before, which gave nobles a dignified death, while commoners suffered slow ones. During the Reign of Terror, more than 16,000 people were beheaded in public squares. Executions became a spectacle. People paid for front-row seats. France kept the guillotine as its official execution method until 1977. The last person executed this way died while the world was already watching Star Wars in theaters. But before a machine could kill with that kind of efficiency, the condemned faced something far slower: the breaking wheel. You're tied to a cartwheel, laid out flat on a wooden platform. The executioner is holding a heavy iron bar. He's not going to kill you in one blow. He's going to break every bone in your body one at a time, starting with your legs, taking his time. This method, known as breaking on the wheel, was used for centuries across Europe, especially in France and Germany between the 16th and 18th centuries. After shattering the major bones, the executioner would weave the still living body through the wheel's spokes, then hoist it upright and leave it on public display. Some of the condemned took days to die, pecked at by crows while they were still breathing. In Germany, the method remained legally available until 1851. There was even a hierarchy of mercy built into it. Merciful executioners could strike the chest or neck first, guaranteeing a faster death. A small act of pity inside one of the cruelest execution methods ever devised. But breaking bones was still considered, for some crimes, not enough. Hanging, drawing, and quartering. In medieval England, if you were convicted of treason, your death didn't have one stage. It had four. First, you were dragged behind a horse tied to a wooden hurdle all the way to the execution site, sometimes for miles over stones and mud. Then you were hanged, but cut down before you could die. Still conscious, you were disemboweled. Your organs were removed and burned in front of your own eyes. Only then came the beheading, and finally your body was cut into 4 pieces, sent off to different cities as a public warning. This method, formalized in England starting in the 13th century, was used on traitors to the crown for more than 500 years. William Wallace, the Scottish warrior who inspired the movie Braveheart, died exactly this way in 1305. The last full execution by this method took place in 1782, though modified versions, without the final quartering, continued into the 19th century. The goal was never just to kill. It was to make sure nobody ever forgot what happened to anyone who defied the crown. But while England invested in spectacle and drawn-out suffering, Spain was developing a method that looked far quieter, and in its own way even more disturbing for how intimate it was. The garrote. You're seated. Not lying down, not kneeling, seated like you're just resting. A metal collar is fastened around your neck, attached to a frame behind you. The executioner slowly turns a screw and the collar begins to tighten. The garrote vil, developed in Spain, was designed as a more dignified alternative to hanging. Instead of letting the condemned thrash around from a rope, they remained seated, appearing calm, while the mechanism either fractured the cervical vertebrae or slowly strangled them, depending on the version used. Some models included a spike that pierced the spine at the final moment, causing near-instant death. Older versions relied purely on strangulation, a process that could take minutes. Spain used the garrote as its official execution method until 1978, making it one of the last Western countries to fully abandon manual physical executions. The last known garrote execution in the world happened after man had already walked on the moon. Across the Atlantic, while Europe was refining manual methods, the United States was betting on something that promised to be more scientific: the electric chair. You're seated with electrodes strapped to your head and leg, wrapped in sponges soaked in saline solution to improve conductivity. A leather hood covers your face. Then comes the first jolt, somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000 volts for just a few seconds. The electric chair was introduced in 1890 as a painless, modern alternative to hanging. But the very first execution exposed the problem. The initial jolt wasn't enough to kill the condemned man, who kept breathing, his body visibly smoking, forcing a second application. Newspapers at the time described the scene as worse than any hanging. Even so, the method spread to dozens of American states throughout the 20th century. It's estimated that more than 4,000 people were executed this way in the United States. Reports of botched executions, smoke rising from the headpiece, visible sparks, multiple jolts required, became common enough that several states eventually started looking for alternatives. But not every execution needed technology. Some of history's slowest deaths came from something as simple as boiling water, boiling alive. You're lifted by chains and lowered inch by inch into a cauldron of oil or water that's already boiling. There's no fast way to do this. The executioner deliberately controls the speed of the descent so the pain builds up gradually, layer of skin by layer of skin. This method appeared across different cultures throughout history, but it earned a particularly dark chapter in 16th century England. In 1531, King Henry VIII passed a law making boiling the official punishment for poisoning, after a cook named Richard Roose was accused of killing people by mixing poison into a bishop's food. Rose was boiled alive in public, a process that, according to accounts from the time, lasted over 2 hours. In Japan, a similar method, called kama yude, was used on criminals considered especially dangerous, including well-known cases of outlaws executed inside massive metal cauldrons originally meant for cooking. The English law authorizing boiling as a death sentence was repealed in 1547, less than 2 decades after it was created. Still enough time for the method to go down in history as one of the most inhumane punishments ever formally written into law. That brings us to the method that promised to be the cleanest of them all, and that, in practice, would become one of the most controversial in modern history: the gas chamber. You're seated in a metal chair inside a hermetically sealed chamber, with glass windows around it so witnesses can watch from outside. Below the seat, a capsule of cyanide pellets drops into sulfuric acid. Cyanide gas begins forming almost immediately. Contrary to what the method promised, death wasn't instant. Doctors who witnessed executions reported that the condemned remained conscious for roughly a minute, struggling increasingly to breathe before losing consciousness. Some described visible convulsions and sudden changes in skin color. The gas chamber was introduced in the United States in 1924 in Nevada, specifically pitched as more humane than hanging or electrocution. Ironically, the same chemical principle used in these chambers would, just years later, be adapted for one of the greatest crimes against humanity ever committed, during the Holocaust. A grim historical coincidence the method's own creators could never have imagined when they designed it as a scientific solution. Only a handful of American states still keep the gas chamber as a legal option, though it's rarely used. But if the gas chamber tried to dress up death with science, there's one method that never bothered pretending to be gentle. Because it never had to: impalement. You're placed on a wooden stake, carefully greased and sharpened in a very specific way, pointed enough to pierce, but blunt enough not to hit vital organs right away. The goal isn't a fast death, it's making sure you die slowly over hours, sometimes days, as your own body weight pushes the stake deeper and deeper. This method became historically tied to Vlad III, the Wallachian prince who inspired the Dracula legend in the 15th century. Accounts from the time describe entire forests of stakes lined with impaled bodies, used as a show of power against invading Ottoman forces. Some chroniclers claim enemy armies retreated the moment they saw the scene from a distance. The method wasn't unique to Wallachia. Empires across Asia and the Middle East also used variations of impalement as public punishment, generally reserved for the most serious crimes: treason, rebellion, or desertion during war. What sets this method apart from everything else on this list isn't the pain, it's the time. While the guillotine chased speed and the gas chamber tried to disguise suffering with science, impalement never hid what it actually was: a public warning, written on the body of anyone who dared defy power. And that's exactly the pattern connecting every method on this list, no matter how different they look on the surface. The wheel, the noose, the garrote, the chair, the gas, the stake, none of them existed just to kill. Each one was engineered with almost technical precision to turn one person's death into a message for everyone else watching. Some of these methods disappeared centuries ago, others technically are still on the books today, even without active use, sitting in some legislative drawer nobody dares reopen. And the most disturbing part isn't that humanity invented so many different ways to end a life. It's that, in almost every single one, the real target was never the person dying. It was everyone left standing there to watch. The pain was just the delivery method. The audience was always the real target.